Being recorded. Got it. And I'll remind people of that as well. Hi, people are coming in. Welcome those of you joining this Fireside Chat today as we wait for others to log in. So if you can just hold fire the next few minutes, we'll just allow for other people to log in. But welcome. Great to see you. Thank you for joining us. We'll just wait a little bit longer for others to join on the hour. going to start in about 2 minutes. We'll just wait for people to finish logging on. Okay, I think we'll make a start. No doubt people are still logging in, but welcome to the Officers Association Fireside Chat with St James's Place Wealth Management, titled Exploring a Career in Wealth Management. Start my video. My name is Johnny Ball. I am the Key Partnerships and Events Manager at the Officers Association. And just to let you know what we'll be covering off before I ditch the slides, because I'm sure we have not come here for death by PowerPoint. If we just move on to the next slide, please. Just to cover off exactly what we will be going through in this hour or so. First of all, we'll introduce you to our two fantastic guests from St James's Place. And in doing so, just to remind you that this session is recorded, so there's no need to take notes. You'll be able to access all the information from the Officers Association website and from the St James's Place landing page on the Officers Association page too. The first bulk part of the event is a fireside chat discussion with our two fantastic guests, Mark and Ed, who I'll introduce shortly. We'll then have a period of Q&A from you. So do think about your questions. Do use the chat function, which I'm sure you're all familiar with in this format. So as we're going through, if you've got a question, don't hold back. Fire it in the chat box. We do have members of the team at the back end of this webinar who will be able to assist too. I can see those questions, and if we feel it's relevant to bring into the discussion, we will do. But do fire those in the Q&A function, and we'll have a really good detailed discussion, an opportunity at the end to take those questions from you before finally wrapping up at the end of the webinar, around about just after 1 o'clock, between 1 and 1:30. So without further ado, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome our two speakers, two veterans from the Army and Royal Marines. And before we get into the main part of today's event, I thought it'd be really useful just to hear a little bit of a whistle-stop tour through your military careers. We can see what they do at St James's Place, but I thought it'd be really useful. Ed, can you firstly just give us a bit of a whistle-stop tour for your career, and then we'll hand over to Mark after that. So if we can just ditch the slides, please, Lina. Ed, welcome.
Thanks, Johnny. Ed Wilson, as Johnny says, thanks very much for the intro. My internet connection does say it's a little bit unstable at the moment, but I'll just crack on. Are you getting me all right, Johnny?
Yeah, we can always stop your video and come through a bit smoother if it does struggle.
Okay, fine. So by way of background, I was an Irish Guards officer from 1991 through to 2012. In that time, I did just about all the sort of main jobs from platoon commander up to battle group chief of staff, 4 tours of Northern Ireland, tours of Iraq and Afghanistan as well. Interestingly, I worked with Mark Elliott when I was at the Operational Training and Advisory Group, training people for Afghanistan. So I've known him for 15, 20 years nearly. And decided that it was just time to not be an employee anymore. And I wanted to be self-employed. But I loved my time in the Army. And I think it set me up really well for a career in wealth management, and we'll come on to why in a moment. That's it from me. Mark, over to you.
In fact, before we let Mark chip in, Ed, during all of that time in that lengthy career, did you ever really think about what you're going to do next, sort of during the beginning, mid, or towards the end?
Yeah, I did really. I mean, I was always intending to be a career soldier, but then it just got to a time when I thought, right, no, I'm done here. I want to see more of my family, etc. So what am I going to do? And the driving force and the thing that kept on coming back to me is whatever I do, it's got to be about people, because that's what we all do in the military, whether it's the Army, Navy, or Air Force. And that's what I still do now. You know, this is all about people. It's my clients and helping them to achieve what they want to achieve. So I sort of thought, right, whatever it is, it's about people. I looked at training, I looked at security, I looked at any number of other things, but ultimately, finance has always interested me. I've always been an investor since I was a young officer, and running a wealth management practice is about building relationships with people. And, so that's where I ended up, and I'm very glad I did.
Yeah, I think that definitely resonates with all of us on this call at the moment. Definitely. So, no, thanks for that, Ed. So, Mark, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Johnny. Good afternoon, everybody. As Johnny alluded to, Mark Elliott, I joined the Royal Marines in 1997 as a recruit, pretty much straight out of school. And then went back through officer training in 2001, back to Lympstone, hence I look slightly older than I actually am. On completion of officer training, the normal sort of troop command, platoon command, company 2IC, with a United Nations tour thrown in there as well. And then went down to the Operational Training Advisory Group, as Ed alluded to, I met Ed. And actually I worked for Ed at the point, and then returned to 3 Command Brigade as the Adjutant 40 Commando, a couple of Afghanistan tours, then off to Staff College, few joint jobs in PGHQ before going back to 3 Command Brigade as a company commander. And then on completion of company command, went back to Lympstone to head up officer training. Left the Royal Marines on 1st of October 2016 and started with St James's Place in November of the same year. And I'm now currently, as my job title says, Head of Strategy Implementation, which is a very grand way of saying, actually, I'm the Chief of Staff for a guy who runs London, to put it into sort of an accurate we'll understand. So that's me.
Great. No, thank you. And again, during your time, was there much interaction with sort of the corporate world at any of those jobs? Did you sort of brush up against military contractors and managers and deal with those, or civil servants, and think that kind of start influence your thinking about what might happen next for you?
Do you know what? Johnny, it's fascinating because I brushed up against all of those, particularly in PGHQ and the latter sort of post-staff college sort of phase of my career. But much like Ed, my father was in the Royal Marines for 30 years. I thought that was me. Until the summer of 2015, I pretty much thought I'd be until I was 55 years old. And so, I had my sights firmly focused on what it would look like. I knew I wasn't going to be a CO. I knew that of a commander unit. So I understood that. And I was going to go down the defense diplomacy route. That was my plan. But as of that summer, I had that sort of thought of, hang on, all the jobs behind me look better than the ones in front of me. I've had an amazing 18 years at that point, but I wanted it in my mid-30s to challenge myself in the private sector. Much like Ed, I want to see more of my family. I was on my second marriage, so I had that challenge, logistics to deal with. And so therefore that I decided I would sort of look at pastures new and haven't regretted it for a moment.
Awesome. No, thank you. I'm sure many of us.
And if I can just jump in there as well. One thing I thought when I was leaving is I can stay into the age of 55, but at 55, I just get another job. If I leave at 40, I can have another career. So that's what I've done. That's
a great point.
Yeah, I think that's something that needs to be communicated to the community, particularly those still serving. And for those, we at the Officers Association often get people that come back to us for career consultant advice who might be on their second, third, fourth career. And there's nothing wrong with that. And we are very good at reinventing ourselves from the nature of service. So some really good points there. So thanks for those intros. Really good to know a little bit about your background, and for our listeners to be able to start to think and form their questions based on your experiences and what they might be able to connect with from their own military experiences. But we are here to talk about wealth management. So I think it's time for us to get into the weeds of that. And I've heard, I sat on a really good presentation with one of your colleagues from St. James's Place. And what I got was a sense that there's a real need at the moment right now within a sector. There's almost a real kind of UK PLC need for financial advice, wealth management, and an increase in the demand for financial advisors and wealth management. Why is this so? What's going on there? Ed, can you perhaps give us a bit of a background on why is that the case?
Yes, certainly. Thanks, Johnny. Okay, let's look at nationally at what the situation is. There's been some research done that indicates that there are something like 11.5 million people in this country with over £50,000 of investable wealth. And that aggregates up to £2.4 trillion of money that needs a home. And that amount is rising over the next few years. It's forecast to rise to 2.7 trillion. At the same time, there is going to be a huge amount of intergenerational wealth transfer as our parents and grandparents depart this world sitting on enormous amounts of property wealth, and they want to move that on to the next generation, often within their own lifetimes, but they don't know how to do it. And they don't know what the implications are for them or indeed for their beneficiaries. Allied to that as well, state pension ages are rising and final salary pension schemes are reducing, which means that individuals have got to take more responsibility for their financial long-term future. And that leads them to need advice. Do I have enough money? If not, how do I get enough money to live the life I lead? They need flexibility on how they can access that money, and they lack the knowledge about how they're going to be able to do that tax efficiently. The tax regime in this country is becoming ever more complex. And so to maximize their tax efficiency and their availability to access the right money at the right time, they need advice. Allied to that, there has been a huge reduction in the number of financial advisors in this country over the last 20, 30 years. And so there is an enormous opportunity for good quality people to give top quality advice to people who want to know what the best options are for them. And that's really where the opportunity lies. If you're the right person who can learn the right skills and generate the right relationships with people, then there is an enormous opportunity to truly help individuals and families achieve what I like to call financial freedom in a world worth living. And that's it from me. Any other points? You get me, Johnny? Hello?
My speaker went there. My apologies. Okay, sorry about that. Back in. Thank you. I got the majority of that, and obviously the bit that I did miss, but I dropped my keyboard, which is always good, isn't it? Which set off the gremlins. Mark, what's been your take on that from a sort of?
That's a hard act to follow, Ed. Thank you for that. The only thing I would add is that Ed alluded to the great wealth transfer. You're looking all up about 5.5 trillion over the next 20, 30 years. But the generations it's going to and the ones behind us, and I'll call us collective, they're also now interested in not just their returns, their investment, but the purpose and the impact of their investment. So the environment, social governance, ESG, responsible investing. So, it's an exciting time to join the industry, and I hope Ed agrees. But it's a fascinating point at which to help people understand the impact of their investments and align to their visions and their goals that Ed alluded to, and the complexity which it is, unless you've got somebody who understands it like Ed does intricately. So it's a great time to be joining the industry, and particularly be giving financial advice as Ed does.
I think what you've both done is perfectly portray the kind of the intelligence preparation of the environment, call it the human terrain, the grounds, and other services depictions of that also apply. But I think you've really situated it really well. And that's what came across to me when I started looking into this myself, when I listened to that talk. But for me, like anything, in the military community, when we see these challenges and these opportunities, we see it as an opportunity. So it strikes me that there seems to be an opportunity for the officers from all three services. Indeed, we have two represented today. So what was your own personal journey like once you'd seen that opportunity? What was your journey like into the sector? Because I'm right in saying that you've both ended up working slightly different within the sector. And that actually demonstrates the variety and choice available in those different pathways. So Ed, tell us a little bit about your story, about how you got to essentially run your own business.
Okay, well, when I decided to get into wealth management, I always knew I wanted to go to St. James's Place ultimately, but I was quite worried about the self-employment aspect of it. So I thought, right, I'm going to go and get an employed job first. And at the time, back in 2012, Barclays Wealth were doing a sort of career change program, which they've since stopped. But I applied for it, the very first job I applied for, and they gave me a job. I thought, this is blooming easy. And I did various interviews and things like that. They said, yeah, we want you. But then the following week, they rang me up, said, the budget's just been cut, and because we haven't written the offer letter, we're not going to. And I thought, well, I was only ever going to be there for 2 years, and then I was going to go to St. James's Place. So I'm just going to fast forward by 2 years. And I got straight in touch with St. James's Place. We've got a very good financial advisor training academy, the St. James's Place Financial Advisor Academy. And I said, listen, this has happened. I'm already using my enhanced learning credits to get qualified anyway as part of my resettlement. What's the score? They took me through a number of interviews and psychometric stuff and all that kind of stuff, and then said, yeah, you're on. And I finished in the army on the 13th of December 2012 and started with St. James's Place 5 weeks later. And I went through our Financial Advisor Training Academy, which is a 2-year program, the first 6 months of which is all about getting the qualifications, really. And then you go into the implementation period and start building your business. And so that was how it worked for me.
And Ed, I've just had Ed, sorry. Mark, tell us a little bit.
That's all right. That's all right.
Mark, tell us a bit about your journey.
So mine was slightly different. I left the Royal Marines not having a clue what sector, what industry, what job I wanted to do. But what I did know was that I wanted to join a business that had a good culture, good values, good standards, was big enough to take a bit of a risk on me because I'm a bit of an unknown coming out of the Marines, and I haven't had any commercial experience at all. And I wanted it preferably to be a FTSE 100 because we all leave a brand, a regiment, a chip, a unit, whatever. And we're quite proud and quite esteemed. And it's not necessarily, the dinner party chat, but I wanted to think, what, actually I've got a good brand as my starting point. I interviewed through networking with friends for a job in the insurance industry, was unsuccessful, got down to last unsuccessful in that. And I was about to go to the last one of one, effectively to meet my boss with one of the big American banks in the operational risk team. And one of my good muckers sort of stabbed me in the front and said, mate, that's not you, mucker. You're going to get stuck in middle office. Have a look at this. And he sent me an advert from the Officers Association, which talked about a partnership development manager role, which is a role we still have, which is where you work intimately with people like Ed. I used to look after 30 of them. So I applied for that role at the back end of October of 2016, having left the Royal Marines on the 1st. I had a pregnant wife, slight pressure, slight bit of friction occurring. I haven't got a job, X, Y, Z. And then just started the interview process and then started with SJP on the 26th of November. So I had a slightly longer gap than Ed. But that was not knowing I wanted to be an SJP, just doing my research, analysis, networking, and then a good friend saying, look at this. This sounds a bit more like you. And that was 5 years ago. So it's been great.
The power of the network as well demonstrated there, and that kind of mentorship and advice from the community. So we've got a question. We're wrapping one of our questions from the audience, actually, from Edmund Wood, who asks about what are the qualification requirements for a service leaver attempting to transition into wealth management, and what types of positions are open at the start of the career. And wrapped up in there as well, you mentioned it, Mark, about your kind of doubts around commercial experience. So I guess there's a question there to our job seekers, and it'd be good to get both your take on this, about qualifications specific to the industry, and also commercial experience, and about the perceived lack of commercial experience. And having both of you served, lengthy careers in the armed forces, how did you kind of address skills, experience, and qualifications, perhaps in your CV and an interview? So perhaps Mark, we'll go straight back to you if we may.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So sort of twofold. To do what Ed does, you do a level 4 qualification, and I won't do any more on that. Ed can touch on that. The work, the analysis needs to go into that. But I, as an employee, am also going through that. And it's a diploma, and I'll let Ed talk about that. I'll pick up on the commercial experience, because it's a question I get asked a lot, actually, by a lot of people. I've got no commercial experience. I've never worked in the private sector. I wouldn't worry about that, because you haven't, and that's fine, because they're not employing you for your commercial experience. They can teach you that. They can put you through qualification courses. They can expose you to it. What they're hiring you for is your leadership and management, your ability to bring simplicity to complexity, the stuff they can't teach people, in a classroom or in an environment, necessarily in a team environment within an organization. So you will learn those. And if you get the foundations right, as I do, the culture, the values, the people that you're working with, you will learn the rest. I didn't know what an ISA was until November 2016. Right. And to pick up on a point earlier, had I had some sort of financial advice when I was a young officer, I'd have done things very, very differently. Ed is clearly far more astute, which is why he runs his own business, than I was. But I would do things very differently. And therefore, that need for advice, is again reinforced by that point. I genuinely wouldn't worry at all, because anybody who you're sat in front of in any organization is fully aware you've got no commercial experience, but that's not why they want you. They want you for all the other assets, which we may come on to, that you bring to their team, to their office, to their organization.
And Ed, I guess, is this the first time you've actually run your own business? So then people might try and say, well, what's your experience of running a business, and what kind of skills and qualifications you have?
Okay, thanks, Johnny. I'm going to broaden it out into two bits. The easy bit is the qualifications bit. And the qualifications you need to be a financial advisor, as Mark says, there's the level 4 diploma in regulated financial advice, as run by the Chartered Insurance Institute. There are other level 4 qualifications as well, but the bottom line is you need a level 4 qualification, which gives you the ability to give financial advice to retail clients. And within St James's Place, the Financial Advisor Academy will enable you to get that, and they're relatively straightforward exams to pass. So it takes a few months, but if you apply yourself, do the coursework, you'll pass the exams. Okay, that's the straightforward bit. The most important thing is actually the attributes you need, because without the right attributes, you won't be able to build a successful business. And Mark talks about culture and everything like that, which is absolutely bang on the money. So my most important attribute is my integrity, because ultimately what I do is I build trusted relationships with individuals and with families. And without integrity, you can't achieve that. So integrity and trust go hand in hand. Resilience is important, because particularly if you're going to go down the route that I've gone down, you're starting off as self-employed, trying to find client one, okay? And you ain't going to make big money in year one. It takes time to build that business, and you need resilience. And the forces, if you're in the forces, you should be a pretty resilient person, and the ability to plan as well. So I literally wrote myself a campaign plan, just like I was teaching people to do when I was an instructor at Staff College, with my various goals, waypoints, what I needed to do at what period of time. And I planned for my future. And you just move along the campaign plan. But integrity, trust, resilience, the ability to plan, those are the key things. Getting the qualifications are quite straightforward. Subsequent to that, I have improved my qualifications, and I'm now a chartered financial planner, which takes a number of years to do. Those are far harder exams. But I would always say that people should have that in mind once they come into the industry. But yeah, the start off level 4 qualifications, relatively straightforward. You can use your enhanced learning credits for them as well, so that effectively they're pretty much cost neutral, and they're relatively straightforward. You don't need to be some maths guru. You need to understand maths, obviously. If you can't explain percentages to someone, you're going to have a problem running a business. But it's not complex degree level maths, if you know what I mean.
Thank you. No, valuable. We've had a couple of questions come in as well about for those qualified or part qualified as chartered accountants or CFAs, is there a route directly to technical roles, in particular equity analysis or fund management? That's come from Merlin. Also, we've got a question about other paths, perhaps, around to train to become a financial advisor. Does it also offer a path for future para planners? So perhaps before we get your take on those, perhaps we have a bit of a more of a general question rather than these kind of technical skills or qualifications based one. And that's about how people can actually pitch themselves, because Ed, you spoke about integrity and those things that we hold dear in the armed forces, and assume that works into the narrative of how you pitch yourself to your clients and to ultimately when you began your journey. So how do people work out their value and their values and how they pitch themselves correctly to St. James's Place if they pursue this path? And what are the kind of key things people need to address before they sort of pitch themselves to any business? Mark, perhaps if we can get a take on that one first, and then we'll come back to those technical ones.
Yeah, definitely, of course. Yeah, I think it's interesting because this whole point of a pitch is one thing that I think probably splits the room slightly. Because again, if you're sat in front of somebody, an SJP, you're there probably because you've been referred in because the attributes that you offer. And Ed's touched on a couple of them, and there's lots of others. The common thing I see is how people take it, and I see it on CVs as well. And I can say this because I made exactly the same mistake. They try and say what they've done rather than who they are. And I think that's a really key point to take away. In my own experience, when I started drafting my CVs, my wife's friend's an executive search headhunter, and she absolutely shredded it. I had 25 iterations in front of her before it was vaguely fit for purpose, because she said, you've made that classic ex-military officer mistake. You've told me what you've done and not who you are. So I think just bearing that in mind, I would also say that networking through the Office Association or individuals is the way that you'll get sat in front of a hiring manager. They will talk about your experiences, and try to understand you and what you can bring to their team. So it's about your adaptability. It's about your breadth. If you think about the military, we move job roughly every 2 to 3 years, broadly. And it can be very, very, particularly as officers, you can go from left of arc to right of arc. In the private sector, most people stay in a lane. They might move companies, but they stay in fairly similar roles. Therefore, when they change roles, some people find it not everyone, quite a challenge. When change happens, they find it quite a challenge. So being able to articulate, your adaptability, your resilience that Ed talked about to change, your humility, your integrity, all the things that we in the military just take for granted, because we all are carved from very similar stones. We should be, broadly. And therefore you take that as the norm. That is not the norm in the private sector. Having been employed in a FTSE 100 company for the last 5 years, I can tell you that, and I could give you live examples, which I won't, but live examples. You know, your ability to expose vulnerability, stick your head above the parapet, have a go. Don't fear failure. I failed at that. I'll pick myself up, dust myself down. You know, that the ability to compose yourself under pressure, you know, coupled with emotional intelligence. These are the attributes that you want to surface in any interview with any organization, because that's why you're sat in front of them. It's not because you've got commercial experience, unless you're very niche, unless you're very technical, which some signalers or which I've had a conversation with previously, you know, that's fine. If you are niche, then that's different. The technical side, and we can touch on that because there are technical elements in SJP, and there's a few on our website now. So I would be building up that, you know, your leadership and management. If you think about the issues you've been exposed to with young soldiers, sailors, airmen, airwomen over your career, you know, you take those for granted. Oh, that happens everywhere. It doesn't. The issues you deal with on a Monday morning when you work into the squadron, company, flight, office, whatever, people don't necessarily deal with that. So your ability, you know, your level-headedness and to think bigger and more strategically about various issues is what they are looking for from you. That's quite a long-winded way, I think, of answering your question, Johnny, but forgive me.
Covered loads of ground. No, I loved it. And you also touched on the fact that we're so blessed in this community. You'll be spoiled for people tripping over themselves to give you advice and looking at your CV. And you know, wow, sounds like you had an amazing person.
Any military individual, ex-military who's working, who doesn't give you an hour of their time, not worth talking to. I spoke to Ed before I joined SJP. And that's not to belittle anybody, because everyone's busy, but we've all been here, how daunting it is. And anybody worth their salt will give you an hour of a coffee, a beer, glass of wine, and numerous ones probably.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, paying it back, paying it forward, I think is those terms that I use, but it's really true in our community. And also at the Officers Association, we've got two fantastic career consultants, Lisa and Fiona, who will beast you a bit with your CV, but by the time you come out of that beasting, your CV will look so much better. And before we address some of these questions around some technical roles as well that have come in the chat box and in the Q&A function, Ed, do you want to get your take about how people value themselves and pitch themselves within the sector?
Yeah, it reminds me very much of the final interview I had with the Financial Advisor Academy that we've got, where the director there said to me, Ed, you've never sold anything in your life, have you? I sort of looked at him and I thought, that's utterly wrong, I said to him. I said, every single day when leading soldiers, you're selling your plan to them. They don't follow you and do what you tell them to do because they have to, or at least that is the worst way of leading somebody. You know, the best way is for them to follow you because they believe in you. And, you know, that's what I want to do with the clients that I'm going to build up in my practice. And, you know, that's ultimately the pitch I had. You know, this is about doing the right thing, giving people the right advice, generating trusted relationships. And, you know, people then do what you say, generally. And I always, even now, you know, clients will, you know, come up with questions when I'm suggesting a particular course of action for them. And that's not, I don't take that as an objection. It's a request for clarification, which normally is a result of me not explaining something in a way that they understand. And if you change your language and think about what their clarification is, then ultimately, normally, you know, they take my advice and say, yeah, let's go for it. So this is about, you know, it's about communication. It's about generating empathy, understanding what someone's requirement is, understanding their why. You know, what's their purpose? What's their goal? What's driving them? And, you know, that's really enjoyable.
Oh, you sold it to me. So you're a good salesman. There you go.
Johnny, just that, probably wrapping up slightly, is the ability to engender fellowship and build relationships. And Ed's alluded to it. I think we do take it for granted in the military because it's in some way everyone does it, and you're an officer, whatever cat badge, whatever service, and yeah, that's what you do. you're engaging, you build relationships, you try and support team environment, get the best for the team, best out of everybody. That is where you are worth your weight in gold to an organization.
Okay, but so before we look at these questions from the audience, while on that thread that you've alluded to, we're talking a lot in the armed forces about being people first and values and standards, and you both mentioned that in your answers. How does that survive contact with the commercial world? Has it anything surprised you in terms of sort of values, cultures, people? Has that been something that has been natural for you, or is it something that's been a challenge in those expectations? Because we talk about it a lot. So Mark, I saw you nodding. How's that experience been?
I think I said at the sort of top end of the podcast that one of my key sort of non-negotiables was trying to find as best I could an organization that had a culture and a sort of value standard similar, never identical, because, and Ed and I chat a lot, never try and repeat what you've had because you won't find it, and that's fine, and accept that. But if you can find an organization that has similar culture and values and standards to your own, which is helpful, then you'll get things right. It's been brilliant, absolutely brilliant. It's been their understanding, they're cohesive, collaborative, very inclusive, and we're getting more so. SJP gives you time and space to think because they understand that it's a significant transition. The executive board are aware of people coming in from different industries, but also more aware now from the military and what the military add. Therefore, it's kind of understanding of that has increased in the last couple of years. We signed the Armed Forces Covenant, which we hadn't had before. I can't say enough about it. The willingness for individuals to help you absorb you. As a sort of landing pad, for want of a better phrase, having come out of the Marines after 19 years, it's been exemplary, and people want to help and support you, regardless of what department, what division, what office they're in within SJP. And we've got 23 nationally. It's been a great experience. And I, if the next 5 are like the last 5 years, then I won't be going anywhere. Unless of course I get sacked, but hopefully I won't.
Yeah, I guess those values and cultures you pass on to your clients too, right? Ed?
Yeah, I think culture is really important. And a very long-standing, main board managing director of the business, he's about to retire actually, but he's nothing to do with the military and has never been in the army, but everything that he's said has generally resonated with me. And the number of conferences I've been to where he's come up with lines like culture eats strategy for breakfast. Now, it's absolutely true. But also at our annual company meeting that we have each year at the O2, I remember a couple of years ago, him standing in front of us and talking about culture. And there were 8,000 of us in that arena. And he said in front of all of us, he said, look, just don't be an idiot. And he said, we are a people business where we all have to get on with each other. We have to get on with our clients. We have to do the right thing. And if you see somebody who is not doing the right thing, then you need to be the responsible adult in the room and call it out. And it's that sort of culture of personal responsibility where we are all part of the same team that I think is really positive. And at the same time, that culture of having a charitable foundation, of all the employees having dedicated volunteering days that they can take up, the fact that we have raised millions and millions of pounds for charity because we just believe it's the right thing to do, the fact that 90% of us give money monthly through covenanted giving to our charitable foundation. I am doing a virtual ride from Land's End to John O'Groats in March and April for our charitable foundation, along with lots of other people. There are virtual walks, there are physical walks. I've done sponsored rides around the Alps, Mallorca, and things like that. I think that's important. If you take one thing away from this webinar that both Mark and I will have spoken about, it's the fact that the business has got a good culture.
It comes across as you speak, to be perfectly honest. That's very difficult to fake. Quite honestly, it really does. It really comes across. If we can just pick up a couple of these questions. There was a really good question about those that might be qualified or part qualified, as say a chartered accountant or a CFA. And is there any direct technical sort of transfer roles or routes over, particularly around equity analysis or fund management?
I'll take that one. Yes, there is. So first off, if both the CII and CISI have some prior accredited learning. So if you've got CFA qualifications, then get in touch with them direct, and they can see what they can transfer across. If you want to go down the wealth management route, and it might be that you don't have to do some of the exams, and there's sort of buys around that. But yeah, absolutely, there is. We have our own investment management division that sits in London and Cirencester. So there are, performance analyst roles, there is equity analyst roles. The thing fund management I'll pick up on is that our investment management approach, we don't have our own fund managers. It's a bit like Crufts. We select the best in breed from all over the world. And what that enables us to do is give them some of our money to manage. But if it starts to go wrong, we take our money off them and move it somewhere else. So think of it that. So we select from all over the world, and Ed might touch on that, how he actually utilizes that with his clients. But yeah, there are those sort of roles. As of this morning, there were 30 roles on our website. In fact, I think there was an equity analyst actually on there, interestingly enough. So I'd encourage anybody who's interested in that quite niche sort of role or has an experience past to have a good look, and then pick up with me or whoever, if they know anyone else in the business, just to explore that further. But yeah, there are absolutely definitely routes in more sort of niche roles.
Ed, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, we're a big business. We're a FTSE 100 company looking after 150 billion quid of client money, and there have got to be people like Mark and lots of different departments that make that work. Everything from HR through operations, marketing. As Mark says, the investment division, which I think has got well over 100 people in there, and it's growing as well. Look at the SJP careers website. Just Google SJP careers. I think it's www.sjp.co.uk/careers. And there are all the jobs on there. We are also a nationwide business. So yes, with a head office in Cirencester, but with a fairly heavy presence across several different offices in London. But as Mark said, 23 regional offices around the country, ranging from Northern Ireland through Scotland and Wales and Bristol and all that kind of stuff as well. And all these groups of partners. I'm part of a Lombard Street office in the city, but there is a management team above that, which look after us and enable us all to do our work. And there's Mark working in the sort of London hub of things, coordinating all of that. So yeah, we need chartered accountants, we need CFA holders and things like that. And the vacancies are there. But it's just worth bearing in mind, just to reiterate this two-part structure to St. James's Place, where Mark is an employee on the management side, enabling the company to work, enabling me to do my job, along with all those other departments. I am in the partnership, which is all completely self-employed, where we run our own businesses with the support of a big, FTSE 100 company.
And just picking up on those regional offices as well, if I may, Ed, I had a career come in from Mick, and that's about the kind of weight, I guess, towards the London office and any opportunities in the north of England in particular.
Absolutely. There are people in the north of England who need financial advice. There are people in Scotland who need financial advice. And, I know that there's, Mark would probably know exactly where they are better than we do. But if you go onto the St. James's Place corporate website, sjp.co.uk, I was on there actually earlier on, look at shareholder presentations for 2021. And there's a pack in there called the Investor Pack. And that shows you the breadth of where our manpower is. We are genuinely nationwide, actually, and international as well, with Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Singapore offices as well.
Yeah.
So do you want to add into that, Mark, as well?
Yeah. So as alluded to, we've got our most northern office is Aberdeen, and they look after wealth manager. We've got a wealth manager on the Shetland Islands. That's the breadth. So that's the I suppose, the real benefit to what Ed does. You can run your business from wherever you want. It can be in your back garden, it can be in your back bedroom, it can be in your mate's garden, in your mate's bedroom, it doesn't matter. You'll be aligned to an office because we'll help and support you on the entire journey of your wealth management journey. So that's, yes, my boss is the director of London, of which he's got 5 offices now, 6, including Cambridge. But each one of those has a head of business whose responsibility is to try and make Ed's business as efficient and as effective and support him and remove blocks, troubleshoot as best he can, so that Ed can deliver exceptional client outcomes. It's all about the client experience and the client outcome. And I don't just mean the returns on their investment. It's all the elements and the attributes that Ed alluded to at the start, their journey, their experience, of being looked after by one of our wealth managers. From the most vulnerable clients who've got dementia, cancer, right the way down to the young individual who's inherited millions and millions of pounds, doesn't know what to do with it. It's about their individual experience. So our offices, we've got Newcastle, Nottingham, Leeds, Manchester, Liverpool, coming down, Solihull, down across to Cambridge, the 5 or so in London alluded to. Then we've got Cardiff, Northern Ireland, Exeter, Bristol, Newbury, and one in the Solent near Fareham. So those sort of little hubs, if you like, are all over the country, with the head office being in Cirencester. So there is opportunity all over the country, and things change all the time. There might be opportunity this week, but next week the jobs board will ping up and all of a sudden something will arise. I think this morning there was one head of people services was put on there. I didn't have time to read the sort of the blurb on it, but that wasn't on there yesterday when I looked. So it does change, and there's a requirement for all shapes, sizes, colours, creed, and everything. So have a look.
Sounds like it really fits in with the changing nature of work as well, which I think will be reassuring for a lot of people that might be a bit anxious about resettling, and that, as you've both pointed to, the rebalance of the family life as well. So the ability to all those different locations and how you've explained it, that will reassure a lot of people. And a really good question that's come in as well on the Q&A function from Richard, and that's about the kind of percentage balance across the business between those your 2 different routes, the kind of balance of those that run their own business, those that are more employed. What's that balance look like?
I think the numbers are about 6,000 that sit on Ed's side of the fence and about 2,000 that sit on mine. It's about right, Ed, I think, isn't it, broadly?
Yeah, something like that. But then, of course, I think we've got, 4,000 partner practices. But then we employ a number of other people below us. So, I pay my PA's wages, I pay my paraplanners' wages. There's, and I've also got a self-employed advisor who is client-facing, who works within my business. But I own the business. But yeah, Mark, if it's 2,000 employees, that sounds about right.
Yeah, and I think there was a question about paraplanning earlier, Johnny, wasn't there, actually? So
yeah,
we pick up on that. Yeah,
we pick up on that.
Yeah, there are. So there are a couple of routes into paraplanning, and I'll let Ed see what he does. But you can join a business as a sort of admin individual if you want to, and then go up through that route. But we've also got the Paraplanning Academy, which is relaunching this second half of this year. So a bit like Ed talked about, going down the Wealth Management Academy. This is about solely paraplanners. But there are a number of routes. Ed, do you want to add any more to that? So what you do with yours?
So a paraplanner, for those people who don't know, is a person who writes up my advice in a suitably compliant manner. Because my job is to spend as much time talking to clients and as little time doing the administration and things like that. So I'll pay somebody to do that, and I pay a paraplanner. I was using a self-employed guy who worked for a number of St. James's Place partners, and I just paid him on a case-by-case basis. I decided I wanted a full-time person doing it. So I advertised, did a number of interviews of a few, both men and women, and took a guy on in his late 40s. He was his previous job was telesales for a commercial food producer. He knew absolutely nothing about finance. And I said, fine, but you've got the right attributes and I'll get you trained up. And so I took him on admittedly a pretty low salary. And put him through exactly the same qualifications that I did, that level 4 diploma. And, you know, I paid for that. And, you know, he's now got that. He's a fully fledged paraplanner. He gets a decent wage from me. He's on nearly 100% more than he was when he started, you know, 3 years ago. But yeah, as Mark says, we also have a formal paraplanner academy. I just reckon that if I gave him enough time myself, he could get qualified more quickly. You don't actually have to have any qualifications as a paraplanner. My view was that I wanted him to be qualified. But yeah, there are 4,000 partner businesses there who all need administrative support. And so there's a real requirement for good quality paraplanners.
Demonstrates the sort of breadth and depth, I guess, of the roles and the routes in as well. And there's a bit of a technical question, I think it's come in, and that is, or a sector market question, and that is from Hugo, and that's about the rise of Robo advisor platforms, such as Nutmeg and eBestore. Do they pose a threat to the sector and its profitability, and how's it responded to those kind of...
Ed, you go on. I've got a view. Go on, Ed, you go.
Yeah. I think they're absolutely no threat whatsoever. I deal with proper relationships. You cannot have a proper relationship with a computer. A computer does not know whether you've fallen out with your sister or your second child or anything like that. You know, this is about helping clients to identify what their goals are, helping clients to identify what their worries are, and that requires human interaction. You can have robo advice where you can say, right, I've got £10,000. How do I get it to grow the most? That's really straightforward. And yeah, maybe Nutmeg can do that, albeit their investment returns aren't great anyway. But they are a lot cheaper than using a human being. But actually, you know, a computer can't talk to you about, you know, the different lines of operation that your financial life are going to need, whether that's for, you know, retirement, inheritance tax planning, funding the children's university fees, helping them with, you know, first house deposits and weddings, what happens when one of your children develops some heroin addiction or whatever. Yet computers can't do that. And robo advice will not help you with tax efficiency either, really. You know, if somebody's got a query about their tax return, you know, they can give me a call. Now, I'm not an accountant, and if need be, I can refer them to an accountant. But, you know, this is about a proper holistic job. You know, helping people, introducing them to people to do their wills, to do their lasting powers of attorney. What about their financial protection needs? Do they need income protection? Do they need life assurance against their mortgage? What about private health cover? If they run their own business, what about shareholder protection cover, you know, in case one of the shareholders dies, if you and your brother are running a company or whatever? Robo advice doesn't do that. This is about proper full spectrum holistic advice, and human beings need to be involved in that.
I'll only add to all of what Ed said is that we don't even talk about it at corporate level. We don't talk about it. And part of my previous role, I used to sit and have to observe partners like Ed with their clients. And I can tell you now that I've seen husbands divulge more to their wealth management than their own wives, and vice versa. I haven't taken those notes down, obviously, but that relationship, you cannot. There's no way you can get any sort of comparison to it. So yeah, they're not a threat.
We've dealt with that one really well. Right, we've got a few more minutes to take some questions. But before we sort of wrap up with those final questions, so if I can get our audience to think about those, can I get just from you both, why should people dialing in today consider not only the opportunity within your sector, but more specifically with St. James's Place? Why should they do it? Ed, let's get from you first.
Okay, let's think about the job itself and the sector and the opportunity. I think it's a real pleasure to help people to achieve their dreams. And yeah, at the moment, we've had a slight pullback in stock markets, and I'm spending quite a lot of time talking to clients saying, listen, don't worry, yeah, things are down 5 or 6% over the last 6 weeks or so, Don't worry about it. That is the nature of investing, and it's the price we pay for being an investor. But the important thing is to keep your eye on the goal. This is about you being able to stop work, you being able to buy that boat, you being able to live a life in retirement, or fund your children's education and things. And there is no. It's a really good day for me when I say to clients, listen, you're working by choice now rather than by requirement. You have achieved financial freedom. That is a really good result. And then in terms of St. James, and I really enjoy that. I enjoy building those trusted relationships with people. And I've worked with some of my clients now for 9 years, and with another 9 to go or whatever. And I work in several cases with 3 generations of the same family. In terms of St. James's Place, I think having the support of a big FTSE 100 business above you to deal with the regulator, to deal with all that sort of compliance stuff, and that it's just immeasurable the support that a big company like that can do. The research they do and fund managers, that means I don't have to do that. That's a huge weight off my mind. So, and then finally, the concept of owning my own business with its own capital value, which I will in due course capitalize on and sell, is a big deal for me. And yeah, so that's good.
Mm-hmm. And Mark, what would you say to people? Why?
I'll just labour the SJP point, because I've got no exposure to the rest of the sector, because the only place I've been is the only place I've been probably the next 20 years. Culture, ethos, we're a contact business, contact sport, people, and a lot of it, there's a lot of synergy from the military into SJP. And you've probably heard, we probably bored you with it, Ed and I, but it's a great place to work. It's a great place to transition from, even if you don't stay with SJP for a long period of time. It's a great platform which to launch the next chapter of your lives and your careers. And that's, probably where I'll end is what Ed talked about. We left to have second careers in a great organisation. And I think that's certainly what SJP affords us.
And a question that's come in from the panel, from the audience, and that's about how you kind of get over explaining your fees to people and convincing them that obviously it's necessary and it's an investment itself. When they're looking around, shopping around, looking at competitors, is that a challenge for you in your business?
No, I think that people understand that the service that I provide them with is not free. And I think they expect to pay a fee when they get their will done, when they get their car serviced, when they seek financial advice. That's going to cost them some money. The important thing is to explain to them openly, honestly, transparently, and clearly what those fees are and the value they get for them. And there is a misconception that St. James's Place is expensive. And in fact, there's independent research done to say that we are under halfway up the rate card, if you see what I mean. 50% of the sector is more expensive than we are. But as long as you explain those fees clearly, honestly, there isn't a problem at all. With a few people, they say, yeah, sorry, it's not for me. That's not necessarily just because of the fees, but because they don't value the level of service that you're going to be able to give them. But you can't please everybody. But most of the people say, yep, really happy.
Johnny, just to add to that, people often think that our wealth managers are like solicitors, accountants. Every phone call, every letter, every email, that's another 20, 30 pounds. If you wanted to, you as Ed's client could call up Ed 365 days a year. He wouldn't thank you for it. But you could do that. It doesn't cost you anything other than your initial advice fees and the ongoing. There's no more added. You don't suddenly get an invoice every month because you spoke to Ed for 4.5 hours through February. He's on his there waiting to be engaged with, so he can help understand and give clarity to what people want out of their money.
I guess that explains what in itself why we're a good fit as a community for the roles. That kind of, we're used to that from Leach Service. In fact, there's been a really good question linked to kind of that work-life balance, because you explain, I could ring him up 365 days a year. But Katie's got a good question about, so how does that encroach on your work-life balance? You both situated, one of your reasons for leaving the armed forces was about family. So how do you reconcile all of that?
I'll go, really, I've had more control over my life the last 5 years than I ever had before, but particularly looking forward, and no one's going to draft me, in 2 years' time. No one's going to suddenly tell me, well done, you're off to wherever for 6, 9, 12-month tour, kids great, family fine. I work from home minimum of 1 day a week. Only I could probably do more, but I choose not to, because I like being in the office. That's a bit of the institutionalized bit in me. But no, my work-life balance is superb. My boss has been in the business for 26 years. So when I turn around and say to him, I'm going to go and do this in the afternoon, watch my stepdaughter play netball on Wednesday afternoon, he said, yeah, mate, no dramas. I'll speak to you later. And if you want to hear real work-life balance, you probably want to speak to Ed.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. Yeah, I'm self-employed. I have no boss. I set my own working hours. If I don't want to work tomorrow, I won't work tomorrow. Nobody is going to check up on me and find out if I'm at my desk. I have no holiday allowance, etc. It's my business. I'm properly self-employed. The result of that is probably in the early years I worked incredibly hard, and because it's simple but not easy. Building a business, and it takes time and it takes graft, and I've been there at 7 o'clock in the morning and at 10 o'clock at night, preparing for some major meeting I've got the next day. I used to work quite a lot at weekends, but that's my choice. That's not anybody telling me to do that. As Mark says, I haven't had to go off and do yet another 6-month tour or anything like that, or go off and do a 3-week exercise on Salisbury Plain, or whatever it is. I'm home every night, apart from the occasional time when I'm off seeing a client, a long way away, and I'll spend the night in a hotel or whatever. But I set my time, and if anybody's working late, I'm either being inefficient or it's a particularly busy period or whatever. But I have no boss, so it's down to me, really. And I now no longer do any weekend work. I've weaned myself off it.
Well, I must admit, last night as I heard that storm coming, I thought, God, some poor buggers and under a poncho on Senny Bridge at the moment, absolutely wringing wet through. So you certainly don't have that anymore.
But sorry, one other thing, just to sort of, just to go a little bit further, we are a very broad church across the partnership and things like that. And I do know that there are a lot of people who've come in without the sort of desire to build some big business, but they love the fact that just at 3 o'clock in the afternoon they can down tools, go off to the school, pick up their kid, come back, do supper for them or whatever, then work in the evening, or that's life. There's within the partnership on the self-employed side, there's nobody to tell you not to go for it. Fill your boots.
I one of the biggest businesses I used to look after for 4 years. He turned 37 last week. He, like Ed, is in the partnership. He hasn't missed a school drop-off or a school pickup for 5 years because he refuses to. He runs his own business, and like Ed, he's worked hard in the early years, but he's at a stage now where he does every school drop-off and every school pickup with his 3 children. And what an amazing place that is to be, when you own your own business.
Well, yeah. I think we'll end on that positive. we're quick while we're ahead. That's an amazing point. As a father myself, that's an amazing point to end on. So if we can have the slides back up, please, Lima. Thank you both so much. We've covered so much ground there, and you've both been so refreshing and open. So I'm sure that people would have got an enormous amount out of the insights you've been able to provide from 2 quite different routes into the business. But before we do go, for those of you who've had a flavour of this and want to find out more, you'll be pleased to know that St James's Place will be back in the coming weeks. Richard's put here, Mark still hoofing. There we go. That's definitely a Royal Marine thing, isn't it? You'll be pleased to hear, if I can have next slide, please, Lima, that upcoming events that we've got with St James's Place, you'll be able to access. There we go. Discover St James's Place Financial Advisor Academy. So if you are thinking about this, if this has really inspired you, really whetted the appetite, there's a chance to come back and hear more and have a bit of a deep dive. And that's on Tuesday, the 1st of March. You can register via our website for that one. We've also got the Women into Employment event webinar happening on the 24th of March, which is a fantastic, it's the second year we're running it. We've got amazing speakers from an ambassador for the UK. We've also got inspiring women. It's for all ranks, spouses, reservists, an absolutely fantastic day that we're running on the 24th of March. Multi-sectors, public sector, private sector. So don't miss out on that one as well. And it is called Women to Employment, but men are very much welcome too. You can see all these events at the officersassociation.org.uk/events. And if you want to find out more about St James's Place, they've got their own landing page on the OA's website as well. That's a quick screen grab on there, and you'll see those two buttons. That gives you access to the two routes that we've explored today and a little bit more detail about St James's Place. And if you want to hear more from us or get in touch with us, you can contact us via email, phone, or indeed there's our website too. So thank you both. That's been absolutely brilliant to sit down and go through and cover so much ground. And lastly, thank you, our attendees, for attending today. Without you coming along, and we don't get the value out of these events as we should. So I do appreciate your time and what is a busy time for us all. And if you do need to reach out, then do drop us a line and we'll be able to connect you to SJP as well. Mark, Ed, thanks a million, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Pleasure. Take care.
No problem at all.
This webinar will end in 10 seconds.